Welcome to Lose Lips, all the things you wanted to say but didn't know how to say it. Today's topic is student loans. Lately, there's been a lot of talk about student loans and the government bailing out all the people that have student loans due to the pandemic, and how everything has been put on hold, and are the people with student loans going to get some relief? Now, first of all, let's say that because of the pandemic, a lot of people were laid off. Lots of people were going through difficulties. And I do think that what the government did by pausing the student loans made a great difference to a lot of people. People were at this time were losing their jobs. They couldn't pay their rent or their mortgage. They couldn't pay bills. And during this time, a lot of people were struggling, and this was the right thing to do. Now that the worst of the pandemic is over, there has been discussion on should we resume the payments for the student loans. Now, personally, I don't think we should resume the payments. I know President Biden believes that there should be some relief and that people should get the $10,000 relief in terms of paying off some debt of their student loans. I think this is a step in the right direction, but in my personal opinion, it is not enough. Now, during the pandemic, there were some people who received the PPE loans for the small business loans to help pay for their workers, pay their bills to keep the economy going during this time of the pandemic. But what you also have is you have a lot of people who created these certain businesses so that they could get these loans fraudulently. And now the government has decided that these people who received zero interest or very low interest on these PPE loans during the pandemic or whatever, now all of a sudden they don't have to pay these loans back. And interestingly enough, some people in the government received these PPE loans. Let me repeat, these people who received the PPE loans had their loans wiped away. They don't have to give that money back. So in essence, that was free money to them during a pandemic. Now, in terms of student loans, I don't know the ratio between what was given out for the PPE loans for the small businesses versus what the ratio is for the people that have the student loans. But here you have one group that did not have to pay back their loan. And then you have another group that Congress is fighting to actually have their loans paid back, which I don't think is correct. Granted, it's not even a lot of money when you're talking about $10,000 granted and forgiven. The people who have these student loans wanted it to be at least 50,000, which I think would have been a lot better. Yes, it would have cost a lot more, but in reality, $10,000 does not do much in terms of reducing the student debt. I personally still happen to have student loans, from which I graduated way back in early 2000. And here it is, 2023. My personal opinion on student loans is that it's gotten out of control. You have the people that are making decisions in the government who graduated back in the 70s or graduated back in the 80s. And it's interesting to know, I was actually reading an article where certain judges on the Supreme Court and in Congress graduated with $10,000 in loan debt or $30,000 in debt. And mind you, they went to Harvard, they went to Yale, Columbia. They went to these very expensive colleges. The education system has gotten so screwed up that now you have people that are graduating with 50, 80, $300,000. And it's not that we mind paying the money back, it's the interest that is coming from these loans that are making it unbearable and hard to pay. For example, I graduated with a degree with $80,000 in debt. And it's not that we mind paying this money back, but in reality, by the time I am done paying my loans, I will have paid more than $300,000. That is the issue. So when you talk about Biden giving us $10,000 or whatever, that's a drop in the bucket. It's not really helping that $10,000. It's not going to change the fact that I still have to give $1,200 a month to federal student loan payment. When I went to school, you basically go into financial aid. You see if there are any loans or to see if there are any grants. Financial aid office hands you a pamphlet that has information on Sallie Mae or whatever the loan service provider is and say this is what you have and this is what you can do to pay for the school. There's no education that's saying, okay, when you graduate, you're going to have to pay this back and this is the amount of interest. That is not a conversation that happens in the student loan office. All you know is that for this semester, you're going to owe $15,000, $20,000, whatever the amount is. So you're thinking in your head when you graduate, say if it's 12,000 a semester, 24,000 a year, you think you're going to graduate with roughly $80,000 to pay back. But no, it's not that. Not what you end up graduating. You graduate with the 80,000 plus whatever the loan education department wants to tack on in terms of interest. So it's not that we mind paying back the original amount that we went to school with, it's the interest that is making it very difficult for us to move forward. And when I think about it, I think I will actually pay off my house before I actually pay off my student loans. That's when you actually realize that there's something wrong with the system, and it should not be like that. So what do you do? Is it okay for the people who in the small businesses and the people in the government that received these PPE loans during the pandemic to have their debt wiped out, and not the people who went to school and are struggling staying home with their parents, not being able to find a job, not being able to move into their own apartment, not being able to purchase their own home and struggle? Is it right that people that are making these decisions have already had their loans wiped out and the people that really need it have not had their loans wiped out? You tell me what you think is right. $10,000 is nothing. It is a drop in the bucket. It would make more sense to have it $50,000. But now you have a situation where you have all these Gen Zs, you have these millennials, you have all these generations of people that have these student loan debt that are not going to be able to stimulate the economy. Why? Because they have so much debt in terms of student loans and bills and whatever else they need to do that they are not going to be able to get their own apartments. They are not going to be able to get their houses. They are not going to be able to go on vacations and do what they need to do in order to have breathing room. Their focus right now is getting rid of debt, and that debt happens to be student loans. So, as far as I'm concerned, people that are in the boomers, or even people like the judges that are in the Supreme Court and are the people that are in the Senate, or the people that are in the House of Representatives, shut up. Do not say that the people that are still paying their student loans want a free ride, because it is not a free ride. It is far from a free ride. That $10,000 is not going to do anything. We will take whatever we can, but that $10,000 is still not going to stimulate the economy. It's not going to help get rid of all the debt and the interest that has been in the department for such a long time, in the Department of Education. I will leave you with this. Regardless of what your opinions are in terms of the people that have the student loans, what goes for one should go for all. And if one group had their loans wiped out, then it is only correct that the other group should have their loans wiped out as well. It would be great if we can all have our loans wiped out. Honestly, what I think should happen is that the whole system needs to be overhauled. There should not be a reason why people need to go to school in order to better and further their own lives, so that they can survive, so that they can make a living for themselves, so that they can live in a way that is decent for them and others. What is needed is a cap on the amount of interest that is able to be collected on these student loans. I think if there is a cap as to once it reaches a certain point, if you have an $80,000 student debt, capped interest at $10,000, then I think this will be a lot better and it's more manageable for people to handle these student loans. But I think for myself, a lot of people go into these taking these student loans and not understanding what is expected to them at the end. I mean, it happened to me, and yet I'm still paying for student loans 15 years later. And like I said, I will probably end up paying off my house before I end up paying off my student loans. And I leave you with this. What goes for one definitely should go for all. Even if you think that people who have these student loans did it to themselves and they're asking for a handout, you already paid your student loans. So why should someone else benefit? Or why should we suffer? Or whatever when you had to suffer? Things are different now. Things are not the same when people went to school, like 15, 10, 20 years ago, and maybe even 40 years ago. It's a lot different now. It's definitely a business. And I do think that a lot of the institutions are taking advantage of the fact that people are trying to get better and trying to do things better. And they're just taking the advantage of the fact that they aren't really explaining to them, the students, the entire message, our financial liability that's going to be expected of them once they graduate. Thanks for listening to Lose Lips, and until next time.